Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. An arrest in a 25-year-old cold case. You won't believe how detectives got their big break.
He told dispatch, hey, I want to confess to a murder.
Plus, wild, unruly courtroom moments. CourtCam Season 3 is out, and we're giving you an inside peek.
And jury deliberations in the trial of a deadly love triangle. Who killed this Army veteran? Law and Crime Daily, covering court cases from... I'm Brian Ross, in today for Brian Buckmeyer, joined, of course, by Terri Austin. And we begin with an Alabama cold case that broke wide open because of a phone call. Angenette Levy has more on the story.
It was just another day at the police station one day last week for Detective Sean Mukadam until the phone rang and a man on the other end wanted to confess to murder.
I pick up the phone, not really having any expectation of what's going to be on the other side. And that's the first thing out of his mouth is, I killed somebody and I want to confess and tell you the whole story.
The man on the phone was Johnny Dwight Whited. The 53-year-old told Decatur police detectives that he shot Christopher Daly in the head in 1995. Hunters found Daly's body a couple of weeks later. His vehicle was found in a river. Detective Mukadam said Whited confessed because he's dying and wanted to have a clear conscience while giving Daly's family some closure.
We ended up meeting like down the road. We were kind of concerned about officer safety. So we had him come to us. And then it was simple as that. He just was ready to tell a story. Got in the back of a marked unit. I sat in the front seat of the marked unit in the passenger seat, and he literally drove us to the crime scene. He's like, turn right, turn left. When we were at the crime scene, he literally walked us through every little step, where the victim's vehicle was parked, where the deceased was, why. And then after we left that initial crime scene, we actually went to the location where he dumped the vehicle into the Tennessee River.
Detective Mukadam said that Whited and Christopher Daly met shortly before the murders, but he wouldn't comment on the motive. He also said that Daly's family is relieved that an arrest has finally been made. For Law and Crime Daily, I'm Angenette Levy.
Thanks, Angenette. Whited's attorney told Law and Crime that it's been a strange set of events, but he has a duty to defend him just as he would any other client charged with murder. Crazy statements from defendants and wild courtroom moments happen from time to time, but those moments are exactly what are all about the A&E network program CourtCam. Here to talk about CourtCam and the season 3 of this hit show is Dan Abrams, the founder of Law and Crime. And Dan, what can viewers expect this season?
Brian, it's going to be a mix of amazing moments inside a courtroom. There'll be defendants lashing out. There'll be angry judges. There'll also be inspirational moments. There'll be moments where a victim's mother expresses forgiveness to the defendant inside of court. There'll be efforts to escape from courthouses. So there is just a real diversity in the types of stories that happen at courthouses. But it is really all kind of a sense, a little peek into humanity. And you ask yourself, if I was in that situation, what would I do? And I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes CourtCam and the context we provide in some of the interviews as well.
Exactly. One of the most memorable moments that I saw was when a defendant on trial for sexual assault stormed a prosecutor in the courtroom. Dan, let's check that out and talk about it with the backstory after we see the video.
The jury's reached a decision in one of the cases and is about to read its verdict. In under 8 seconds, so much has happened. Let's look at it again. If you look a little closer, you can see Harding remove something from inside his sleeve. Turns out Harding is holding a metal shank. Harding storms the prosecutor's table, headed straight for Assistant DA Roth. If not for the quick reflexes of Detective Kanan, Roth could have sustained serious injuries.
Quite a story, Dan. What's behind all of that?
Well, the question a lot of people ask is, well, how did he get the shank, right? And it's a very different process with regard to security at a courthouse, and they reevaluated their security after that incident, than, for example, going into a jail. If he was going back to jail or to prison, they would certainly put him through a metal detector. But because this was something where he was in court, he was able to avoid that and as a result, almost hurt that prosecutor. We've seen a number of cases on CourtCam where people end up, attacking the prosecutor or attacking their own attorney. And as you can imagine, they almost never succeed, and it certainly doesn't help their case or their sentence in any way.
And you wonder, with all the security that we see in courtrooms now, how that actually could have happened.
Well, exactly. And I think what people forget is sometimes in smaller courthouses around the country, they don't have as much security. We see a number of cases where there's an escape from the courthouse in a relatively small courthouse. And you see a bailiff sort of watch the person go out. It's not a murder case. It'll be a lesser crime. And they then go and catch the person. They know a lot about these people. They know where they live. So we watch the video of them escaping and people chasing them to some degree. But then once they get out, you think, oh, they're home free. They're not. They end up getting caught.
Right. It's high drama, as we see in these CourtCam episodes. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the point. It is the drama. And I think one of the important things, Brian, about what we're doing on CourtCam is we're not just providing clips, right? It's not just a clip show. The idea is provide context around the story, explain exactly what was happening, why was it happening, and then talk to some of the people involved as well.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan, very much. CourtCam Season 3 airing on the A&E networks. Thanks again, Dan Abrams.
Thanks, Brian.
There's an update to the fatal shooting at a protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The 17-year-old charged with killing 2 people and injuring a third is out of jail on a $2 million bail. Kyle Rittenhouse is facing charges of intentional homicide and illegally possessing a gun. The Kenosha County Sheriff's Office says Rittenhouse posted the bond through his attorney. His attorney, Lynn Wood, said that the money was raised through the help of an actor and a CEO. His attorney claims he fired in self-defense. Still ahead on the Law and Crime Daily, a Florida woman charged with shooting a police officer called 911 herself. And later, the fatal shooting of a man inside his own apartment. What police... Welcome back. We're following 2 cases involving officer-involved shootings. First in New York, where authorities in the Bronx have released a body cam video of a man fatally shot inside his own apartment. Terri Austin is here with more. Terri?
Brian, the Bronx district attorney says an investigation found no criminal wrongdoing by 2 responding officers. Records show Kowalski Trawick called the fire department in 2019 after being locked out of his apartment and worrying that the food he was cooking might catch fire. His building superintendent separately called 911, saying Trawick was harassing tenants. Firefighters opened his door and police arrived minutes later. Trawick was holding a knife and a stick when officers tased him. He got up, came at them, and was shot twice. His mother says he was a loving and non-violent person who struggled with mental health challenges.
Hold it down. Why are you? Why are you in my home? Put it down. Why are you in my home? Put it down. Why are you in my home? Put it down.
Oh, he's got a knife.
Yeah, I know.
I got a knife because I'm cooking.
Put the knife down. Come on. Put it down. Put the knife down.
I'm cooking.
Put the knife down.
I just called the fire department
Come
because I got
down.
locked out of my home.
Put the knife.
Okay, you are. Yes! Get out!
And now to Florida, where a 911 call placed by a Jacksonville woman is at the center of her criminal case. Diamond Ford is accused of shooting a police officer. The officer survived. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office says Ford fired at them while they were serving a high-risk search warrant on her home. She's also facing gun possession charges. But her attorneys say she thought someone was robbing her home and didn't know it was police at her door. Take a listen.
Someone's shooting. Somebody please.
You know who's shooting?
Oh, wait. What? Wait, that's the sheriff's office. Okay, hey, hold on, wait. Hold on, whoa. Hello, wait. What? Nothing. Wait, here. I'm opening the door. You got the wrong house.
So dramatic. Joining me now is attorney Dina along with Terri Austin. Terri, that phone call really is interesting. The lawyer for her says that she acted in self-defense, did not know it was the police. Does that phone call help bolster that opinion, that position?
Brian, I do think it helps a little bit. You hear her say in the phone call, what? That's the police? Like she's surprised. So I do think that she's going to be able to use that as a defense because she wasn't clear who was at her door, and she's going to claim that she was shooting in self-defense. So yes, I think it's going to help.
Dina Dahl, the lawyer for Ford, used that phone call to try to get the bail reduced. The judge refused to do that. Is that the end, or can they appeal it further?
They can appeal it further. The judge left room for that, saying if there's more evidence that comes out showing that she was unaware that it was police, that the judge will reconsider. The fact that the neighbors did hear the police announcing themselves was evidence that the judge thought was important and the reason why she didn't reduce the bond.
You know, for both of you, these police-involved shootings continue to plague the country. They're very tough to make a case against the officers, isn't it?
It is, Brian. It's very tough to make a case because they can claim they thought that they were in danger when they were shot at.
And Dina, from your point of view, when they think that they're in that situation where the police say they're self-protection, that really works with juries, doesn't it? Almost always.
Yes, it's very difficult. I mean, there is the stand the ground laws here that she'll be able to use to defend herself, but a police officer using typical protocol gets a lot of deference from a juror.
All right. Dina Dahl, Terri Austin, thank you so very much. And when we come back, an Ohio woman is now on trial. The jury Closing arguments have now wrapped in the trial of an Ohio woman accused of murdering an Army veteran. Erica Stefanko is accused of making a fake pizza order to Domino's, luring Ashley Biggs to her death. Biggs was a retired Army veteran and worked as a delivery driver. Stefanko's ex-husband, Chad Cobb, pleaded guilty to murdering Biggs and helped to implicate Stefanko. Prosecutors are arguing Erica Stefanko is just as guilty as Chad Cobb.
She knew what was going to happen. That was their plan. That was their purpose in going there that night. She drove Chad to the crime scene. She knew why it was going to happen. It was that custody battle. It was retaliation. She made the call to Domino's that lured Ashley Biggs to her death. She followed Chad to the cornfield. She waited at that cornfield for him to dump Ashley's body and the car in the cornfield. She drove Chad home to shower away the evidence. Went back to the initial crime scene with him to clean up the evidence, or to try to clean up the evidence, and hid with Chad at his grandparents' house, the Tallmans, in the back of that detached garage until and that's where they actually were caught by the police.
A key piece of evidence was a secret recording of Stefanko made by the defendant's mother-in-law. The recording was turned over to police 4 years after the murder.
That was their purpose when they got there, to murder Ashley. She says if everything had been told exactly as it happened, then we'd both be in prison right now. I don't disagree with that. That's totally the truth. She also talks about he came up with how to do it. He executed almost all of it. That's important. Almost all of it. She acknowledges that she executed some. The part that he executed went totally awry. Then she says, yeah, if this goes through and I can do this, I'm going to keep her skull as a trophy. She's saying that's what they talked about prior to this happening. That goes to show she knew what was going to happen. They knew what was going to happen. They had a plan, and that was their purpose for going there.
That's the state's case. But when we come back, you'll hear the defense of the woman at the center of this deadly love triangle. Is that recording a confession or a setup? Accomplice or innocent? That's the question before an Ohio jury deliberating the fate of a woman on trial for murder. Erica Stefanko is accused of murdering Army veteran Ashley Biggs. Prosecutors say the murder was over a custody dispute between her then husband, Chad Cobbs, and his ex-girlfriend, Biggs. But her defense says Cobbs and his mother dragged her into the murder plot in order to get her thrown in jail. The defense says there are major issues with the state's witnesses, including Chad Cobb's daughter, who says she heard the defendant make the fatal phone call that lured the victim to her death.
Well, we did all this because we were afraid of the kids being adopted out. Baloney. We asked Cindy, who's got the kids now? She did. The adoption theory is a scam. Those kids were never going to be adopted out. The whole purpose of Chad's scheme is, if I can get Ashley put in prison, guess what? The way is clear for my mom to have all the kids. Erica, knowing that she's got problems with visitation, pacifies Cindy. If she pacifies Cindy by telling her what she wants to hear, she hopes that Cindy will then get control of who? Chad.
The defense says there are major issues with the state's witnesses, including Chad Cobb's daughter, who said she heard the defendant make the fatal phone call that lured the victim to her death.
Well, it would seem that father and daughter don't have their facts straight. Now, I'm not going to pick on a 15-year-old. When this incident happened, she's 7 years old. 8 years later, he comes into this courtroom and describes with unusual detail about this phone call. Yet, she tells us she was asleep the rest of the time. I would submit, ladies and gentlemen, that children of any age group are susceptible to influence.
But of course, prosecutors got the final word and said that it's true that Chad Cobb is guilty, but so too is Erica Stefanko.
But at no time in 3 hours, not once, not a one time, does Erica Stefanko say, I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. I didn't make the call. I didn't drop him off. I didn't do anything, and he is lying. You will never hear that word one time. You will never hear her say that Chad Cobb lied. You will never hear her say that Cindy Cobb lied. She will never say it. She never did. So it's really interesting that the defense in this case is, don't believe anybody, including my client. Somebody's got to be telling the truth, right?
So, Terri Austin, there's no forensic evidence against Erica. Can the jury convict without it?
Yes, Brian, they can, but I think it's going to be extremely difficult to get a conviction here. Like you said, there's no forensic evidence. And remember, the burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. And all they have here are witnesses who have questionable motives. Chad obviously has a questionable motive. He's the one who did it. Now he wants to pin it on someone else. His mother wants him to get a lesser time, if at all possible, and she wants to see the children. And the daughter, while, obviously she's well-intended, she was very young at the time, and it's hard for the jury to believe her. So I think at the end of the day, putting everything on this phone call is not going to have the jury think beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty here.
Well, Dina, certainly that phone call will be key. The jury has asked for the 200-page transcript of the call. What do you think they're looking at?
this phone call was actually 3 hours. It's a very long phone call. So I imagine they want to hear all of it. They didn't hear all of it during the deliberation. There was a phrase that she said in the phone call, which was, "I did my part, and he didn't have to put a gun to my head for it." That is going to be very hard for her to explain away, but perhaps that's why the jury wants to see all of it. Put that phrase into context.
Were you surprised finally, Terry, that Erica did not take the stand?
You know, that was interesting because she went back and forth on that issue, but I think that her attorney probably convinced her that the cross-examination was going to be very difficult, and she decided not to go on the stand. So I'm not surprised. Generally, defendants don't take the stand.
All right, Terri Austin, Dina et al., thank you so much for being here, and thank you for joining us here on the Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.